the founder of ClimateDepot.com, my longtime correspondent and friend. I was just thinking about this, Morano. First time I interviewed you was in May of 2006. So you and I have been at this for 18 years. Church and Morano.
That would have been right before I started at the U.S. Senate Environment Public Works Committee. That's right when Al Gore's film came out, Inconvenient Truth. That's right when I went to work for for Senator James Inhofe when he was the chairman of the Senate Environment Public Works. So that is a different era. George W. Bush was president. We were involved in endless wars. We allowed America to be destroyed by our response to 9/11. And I was in the Senate fighting, not only did I fight the climate agenda, but I even helped persuade my Senator Inhofe to vote against the bank bailout 2008, a few years later. But anyway, that was really a transitional time when America was, going down hard under Republicans, Bush Cheney.
Yeah, and you remember, you and I met. You came over from D.C. You came over to the building where the NRA had their headquaters. We did that first interview in person.
It was like Crystal City, Arlington, Roslyn, somewhere like that. I remember that, yeah.
So I was thinking about it, like, man, me and Morano go way, way back. Well, one thing, Mark, before we get started here, I know you're on Twitter. I'm on Twitter, and I gave CNN and one other news entity, not that they care, I gave them an earful. The only thing that they could come up with after our beloved James Inhofe died was that he was responsible for killing the cap and trade bill. And I'm like, this man was a member of the United States Air Force. This guy was a veteran. He was what Sean Hannity would call, he was a great American story. Poor boy coming up out of Oklahoma. Great guy. I met him. I had the pleasure of meeting him. You worked for him. And the only thing you could say about him is that he killed the cap and trade bill. How dare you? Shame on you.
There was a lot. They were trying to smear him. Also known as the senator who threw the snowball in the Senate. That's what a lot of the epitaphs led with. He was an amazing man. He lived to 89 years old, retired only about a year and a half ago. And he was on armed services. He was on environment and public works. He was a man who started out as a Tulsa mayor. And he was one of those men, I always say he was Trump before Trump in the sense, not in Trump's personal life at all, but I mean in Trump's appeal, because he was the guy that gave the blunt spoken truth. He went after the media decades ago, Senator Inhofe from Oklahoma, in a way that Trump did. He would go on live debates and turn the tables on the host. He would engage in it. He would love it. He would never turn down media. When people would ask him, how much do the fossil fuel industry fund you for your climate denial? His answer was, not enough when you consider how much they give the environmentalists and how well funded the environmentalists are from the billionaire class. And he would always turn the tables, and they could never get him on the defensive. And he was an amazing guy with so many accomplishments. And by the way, that's not isolated. That's a great accomplishment. He killed Obama's cap and trade. I wouldn't mind that being in my obituary as well. But they tried to reduce it all that he was like an anti-science denier when the mainstream media wrote about it. And he was actually a champion of the science against this literal corruption. I mean, the whole idea of net zero, climate change, cap and trade, carbon, that everything Inhofe was fighting is just about an ideology masquerading as science behind it, and that's all it was. Inhofe knew that. He gives speeches on the floor about the United Nations agenda, how they were seeking global governance. This was 20 years ago, before it became chic. I mean, now everyone understands this, post-COVID and lockdown and Great Reset, but Inhofe was decades ahead of his time, publicly from a position of power in the United States Senate. That's what's so impressive. He wasn't a think tank activist on the outside who could say whatever he wants. He took a lot of heat from fellow Republicans for his stances. I remember in meetings, this would be 2006, 7, actually, it would be 2008 when 2009, actually, when Obama was proposing cap and trade. Big conservative Republican senators, aides in private meetings were like, well, we don't want to say anything about climate science because we don't want to be seen as against the environment. So let's just say these bills cost too much. And I remember in the meetings like, wait, so you're telling me they're saying the world's going to end that we have a few years left, that we face a climate crisis, and your response is, yeah, but it costs too much to fix it. If you can't push back on the narrative, we lose the debate. And that was it. So Inhofe was the only, if you don't believe one man can make a difference, I submit to you, Senator Inhofe, who, RIP, because he stood up to the Republican establishment, to the media, to the United Nations. We had UN chiefs testify, and he literally changed the narrative. He was the lead guy, and that helped talk radio, cable news, and from that, that's where Donald Trump was born. And of course, Donald Trump came out saying, and then that brilliant tweet, I think it was 2013, the entire climate agenda was invented to give China, more control of the world. The idea to help benefit China economically, which is exactly, may not be technically true in terms of the origin, but man, it's exactly all it is. EV mandates, we're going to have China the sole automaker in the world. It'll be the leading automaker as we ban gas-powered cars, all the cold green agenda, the rare earth mining. I mean, incredible. So anyway, thank you for bringing up Senator Inhofe. A great man. Now, he rests in peace.
One final thought about Senator James Inhofe of Oklahoma. I think it was you that told me this story. Somebody told me the story, but I heard it from multiple sources. He was on an elevator one time with that clown from California, Barbara Boxer, and he called her Barbara. He didn't call her Senator. He called her Barbara, and she lost it. She was like, "You will address me as Senator. I worked so hard for that. You have no idea how hard I worked for that title." And I could see Inhofe going like, "No, you're just Barbara to me."
She had one of the highest. She was like Kamala Harris, one of the highest staff turnovers of anyone working in her office. I got along with her. She once told me, Barbara Boxer, this is the chair when the Democrats swept the Congress. She told me on a trip to Greenland, which we took as a fact-finding trip. It was her and a bunch of senators. Inhofe couldn't go, so he sent me. I got to go on a charter U.S. Military jet to Greenland, tour it with senators. The senators were huddled inside the ship because it was so cold. And I was talking to the ship captain who was taking us out there, and he was laughing at all the climate alarm. And he was drinking whiskey with the ice that was thousands of years old. And he's saying that's the only way to drink whiskey because the ice, it shatters like glass. This new ice you make in your refrigerator is crap. Anyway, there's a polar bear that killed someone in the village. So the poor polar bear that they called Majestic was slaughtering people right before our plane landed. Anyway, she told me in Greenland that if I ever switched sides on the climate debate, she'd hire me in a second. So I took that as a high compliment. We actually had a picture taken of her arm around me and on our staff on Inhofe's office, put little hearts around it like we had a love affair going. But I enjoyed working for Barbara Boxer. And I also praised her when she went and worked on Larry David. She did one gig as a cameo, more than a cameo, on Curb Your Enthusiasm. It was one of my favorite shows of all time. So I praised her performance, talked about how great the show was, and she just lit up and loved that because I don't think many people in the Senate were watching Larry David's Curb Your Enthusiasm at the time.
That's who Kamala Harris replaced as Boxer, wasn't it?
Good question. I
think it was.
Yes, because Feinstein had been there and was there for decades. So yeah, it was.
Yeah, it was.
Kamala Harris replaced Feinstein, Boxer. Yeah.
Let's talk about Marc Morano, ClimateDepot.com, and the author of too many books, Politically Incorrect Guide to Global Warming, The Climate Hustle. You got so many movies out there, I can't keep track of them all. Find them all at ClimateDepot.com. Marc, you're, and this is why I wanted to talk to you about this, because you're the authority. There's no getting around Morano's truth. This woman is now out there saying that she never was an EV mandator, that she never was for AOC's Green New Deal. She was never for banning the gas stoves. Look, she was for banning the gas stove before banning the gas stove was cool. What's the truth about Harris's record as a tie-breaking vote in the Senate and as an actual member of the United States Senate when it comes to the Green New Deal?
All right, she was one of the original co-sponsors, along with Senator Markey, and the Senate and Bernie Sanders of the original Green New Deal. So she was there in the trenches at the beginning. It's absurd to think she had nothing to do with it. She also cast the tie-breaking vote for the Inflation Reduction Act 2 years ago, which are bringing essentially the funding of the Green New Deal, all these green energy mandates, subsidies, tax credits. the destruction of American energy. And this is what Tim Walz, by the way, the vice presidential candidate, when Obama was pushing this, he told Minnesotans, we can all get rich off of cap and trade and the climate agenda. That's how they're trying to sell this as some kind of miracle thing. But she also was a co-sponsor of legislation seeking to ban gas-powered vehicles. She has been banning fracking for years. All of these now, quietly through a campaign spokesman, cough, mumble, mumble, she no longer supports that. We don't know because we haven't heard from Kamala herself. She just does scripted stump speeches and no interviews. Now, apparently, CNN's going to break that trend. Maybe CNN will ask these piercing questions. Or do you think it's possible that they've already leaked the questions to Kamala's team and she's memorizing them, or she'll have an earpiece? I don't know. But she's doing it with her, someone's called it the 90s sitcom dad, the flubbing, lovable but bumbling Tim Walz, who's going to be appearing with her, apparently, in the CNN interview. She can't do it alone. She needs a man's support is what the spin is on that. But she is the most radical in terms of the climate agenda, next to probably Tim Walz, next to Governor Gavin Newsom. And it's just amazing how they're just backtracking. And, of course, the reason they have to backtrack is states like Pennsylvania, you can't be for fracking banning. You can't be for the Green New Deal because you would be going down, down, down. And that's why they have to do everything in their power to whitewash her entire history as a legislator.
Now, as far as the parts of the Green New Deal, and, you and I talk about this like we're talking about making ham sandwiches. So, folks, forgive us if we get a little inside baseball-y here. But since you and I started talking about this, since Inhofe got into the Senate, since the turn of this millennia and Al Gore's an inconvenient truth, still to this day, Marc Morano, ClimateDepot.com, there is no detectable warming trend across the globe, is there?
It's a great question. Yes, we've warmed since the 1970s global cooling scare, right?
Okay.
And the question is, people say, oh, unprecedented summer, look at all the heat waves. Oh, really? Let's take a look at Joe Biden's EPA charts. 1930s heat waves, 7 to 10 times hotter in the U.S. We had the best record keeping. If you look at it globally, we've probably cooled since the medieval warm period of 900 to 1300 AD, according to all the data, peer-reviewed studies. We've probably cooled since the Roman warming period of about 0 AD. Again, I remember the New York Times reporter said Al Gore is not going to like this when they did the study showing the Roman warming period warmer than today. So it's all about time scales when you say, have we warmed, or are we warming? Yeah, we've warmed since the 1970s. That was the height of the global cooling scare where Walter Cronkite was doing segments, ABC News, the CIA reports were warning about it, NASA scientists, Time and Newsweek warning we had tipping points in which to act. They wanted to put soot on the Arctic Circle to help the sun absorb the sun and melt the ice because they thought it was getting too big. Yes, we've warmed since then. Have we? What about these hottest decades? They literally get hundredths of a degree to tenths of a degree between years, and they claim it's a record. The most recent record, and I went on Stuart Varney on Fox News, and I ended up debating Stuart Varney. There's a lot of these Wall Street business conservatives, they don't want to be seen as against the climate, at least the climate science part of it. They're against the climate agenda.
Right.
But I explained to them that this was out of Europe, this claim, and they used modeling studies, and they put together all this nonsense about average temperatures from around the globe, which is, it's an absolutely meaningless metric. The real metrics are, you look at the heat wave actual records, 75% of all state temperature, high temperature records occurred in the United States before 1955.
Okay.
We were much warmer at the first part of this century than anything we're contemplating now. There's no other way to look at that. This is one of the things. So what people do, extreme weather, this is important. Hurricanes, floods, tornadoes, wildfires, droughts. No trend or declining trends. This is admitted in the National Climate Assessment by the U.S. government. This is admitted in the UN reports, buried deep. So how does the media and the activists get around this? Well, very simply, oh, look at that. There's a flood in Australia. There's a drought in Paris. There's a heat wave in here. There's California since 1994 in the western region. No, globally is what you look at. On climate timescales 30, 50, there is no trend. But what they do is I call it casino marketing. They do it with heat waves, too. You walk in a casino, you see all these pictures on the wall of people with big cardboard checks. I won 10,000 at slots. I won 50,000. I won 100,000. So the media and actors go all around the world. Look, there's a record broken here in Sri Lanka. There's a record broken here in Kenya. Look, there's a flood in Hawaii. And they give you the illusion that these records are being broke everywhere and that it's unprecedented. The same way if you walk in a frickin' casino, you're like, I must play the slots. Everyone's winning. And the lottery does it too. Your chance of winning the lottery are almost nil. The chance of someone somewhere winning the lottery are very high. And that's what they've done. They've taken that lottery philosophy. They find a record somewhere and they give you the illusion that records are being broken everywhere. No. There's always going to be a record broken, just like there's always going to be a lottery winner. But believe me, there's no trend in increases in extreme weather, the same way there's no trend in increases in slot machine winners at a casino.
Okay, so Marc Morano, ClimateDepot.com on our Do-Maker hotline, celebrating 18 years of Morano and Church destroying the narrative of the tree huggers. True or false, sea ice extent in Antarctica is growing?
Great question. That's seesawing. Now, back when I was with the U.S. Senate Environment, this would have been 2008, they were claiming sea ice actually was starting to hit records at the time. And they were saying, well, this is due to climate change. But then we had sea ice start declining in the mid-2000s, maybe 2017. And they started saying that was due to climate change. So I did a history of this. Now, there's not only sea ice in Antarctica, but there's also the land-based glacier ice.
Right.
I found, if you go back a century, and I found the media reports, and I have a special report at Climate Depot, since about 1900 and again 1920, then I think I have something in 1970s, and then I have something 1990, then I have something 2005. The mainstream media, from the New York Times, Associated Press, back and forth stories about how Antarctica, if it melted, would create sea levels of 20 feet and melt Florida, the same thing Al Gore tried to peddle. But you look at all the science, and you talk to scientists there, they said there's no warming signal on the main continent. Sea ice is a different thing because there's that can go every 5 years or so. We seem to hit a record extent, then we'll recede a lot. They claim either way, they claim it's climate change. But then there's a volcano in western Antarctica, so they'll say, look at this, there's all this melting around here. Like, oh, you didn't mention the volcano. But if you look at Antarctica as a whole, there's no warming signal. It's unclear. The temperature signals are not there. There is no climate crisis in Antarctica. At best, it's stable. And even better, it's gaining ice.
Okay, I want to say we have 3 minutes left. 3 minutes. So
Sorry, I'm talking long.
Morano can do a lot in 3 minutes. Okay, Hunga Tonga Hunkatai volcano underneath the seabed or the ocean, the Pacific Ocean off the coast of Tahiti, erupted coming up on it'll be 3 years this coming January, so 2.5 years ago. I can tell you because I live in the southern United States, every prediction that was made by the Huntsville, the guys in Huntsville, and the actual climate scientists that had the GSS satellites, everything that they said has come to pass. We know that a volcano can have a massive impact, and it did. It threw trillions of cubic feet of water vapor into the upper atmosphere. It's not going anywhere. It's too cold. Won't rain down. And we had two of the hottest summers here in South Louisiana and across Texas than anyone's ever had. And they're going like, global warming. You know, they're like, well, no, it's not global. It is where you can look at the vapor trail from the Hunga Tonga High volcano. You can see it, right? It dissipated this summer. It's not nearly as bad. That's one. Now, the final question is, why don't we play devil's advocate with these people? Let's concede that we are warming. Talk about David Archibald and the fact, like, okay, so what? Great for food production.
Yes. Well, first of all, on the Hunga Tonga, that was January 15th, 2023 that erupted.
Okay.
NASA has admitted, and the media won't report this, that volcano injected an enormous plume of water vapor into the Earth's stratosphere. Exactly what you're saying. And it was enough to fill 58,000 Olympic-sized swimming pools. Water vapor is actually a greenhouse gas. There was actually talk at one point of trying to regulate water vapor, but then I remember even climatologists saying, this is getting absurd. Are we going to start regulating garden hoses, swimming pools? But the idea that mankind can, like, well, let's turn off our SUV, it makes no difference. That's not even getting into China, India, the developing world. And what was your last question? What did you ask me again?
David Archibald.
Oh, David Archibald. Yes. That's the other thing. People say, oh, well, Joe Biden, no, heat is the biggest killer. No, cold is the biggest killer. First of all, we fear cold. During the Middle Ages, witchcraft accusations went up as the temperature dropped. During the Little Ice Age, there were more accusations of witchcraft, of crop failure, of hunger, famine, and bad weather due to witches because it was cold. And the same goes for national security. Warm times bring peace. There's more wars when it's cold because you have resource scarcity. And this is the key, is that it used to be called the medieval warm period was the medieval climate optimum. That used to be called the optimum. So somehow we've turned this all around. And the last point I'm going to make here is Al Gore is now entered buffoonery level even for him. He's now giving speeches as of a couple months ago saying that as soon as we pass the net zero Green New Deal agenda, the temperature will drop almost immediately. That is true medieval witchcraft in modern-day America. He actually thinks that the legislative subsidies, solar wind, are somehow going to, the Earth's going to be, oh, they're finally getting with net zero. Let's lower the temperature, or whatever, the board of governors of the Earth or something, or Mother Earth. It's frightening stuff. There's no science to support it. It's nuts, but that's where we are at this point, where people are fearing warmth, afraid of. By the way, warm weather is saving lives, hundreds of thousands, according to a Danish statistician who looked into this. Cold kills 8 to 20 times more than warm weather. More warmth equals less deaths in cold winters, and that's the bottom line. So global warming is saving lives, 99% drop in climate-related deaths over the last 100 years.
All right, you people that are watching on Twitter, on X, and on YouTube, and on Rumble, you get the bonus edition, more Morano you get more Morano and less commercials. That's fantastic. All right, brother, as always, a fantastic 20 minutes. And I said this last time, man, dude, I got to remind myself to not wait 6 months in between Morano visits because it's always so much fun and so informative.
Yeah,
and people
I'm
thank
going to.
People thank me. They thank me. They go like, "Why don't you have him on more often? He makes so much sense."
Would love to come back. I'm heading to Istanbul and Azerbaijani, Baku, between Russia and Iran for the next United Nations Climate Summit with a stopover in Istanbul. So be happy to do live reports from Azerbaijani at this next UN Climate Summit in November.
It sounds good. We'll book it. We'll talk to you then, brother. Safe travels.
Thanks a lot, Mike. Appreciate it.
All right. As always, Marc Morano, ClimateDepot.com.